everyone, it's eclipse season again, so I thought I'd give you a quick lowdown on all the kind of major themes to expect from this supermoon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. So let's get into it and see what is in store. So first thing to say is that of course this is a supermoon lunar eclipse, and this is kind of like a triple whammy almost of energy. So, you know, normally full moons are quite emotional times. You add to that the fact that it's an eclipse, which is kind of like a supercharged full moon, and then on top of that it's a supermoon, which means that the Earth and the moon will be very, very close together. The moon is essentially in the part of its orbit that's closest to the Earth, so it will look very big in the sky. You'll see the red color probably a lot more easier. It'll be more dramatic, and obviously it has this kind of amplifying effect. So don't be surprised if you feel quite emotional, or you know, if you've got sort of swelling in the body, if that kind of gets a little bit worse temporarily, or you're just kind of generally feeling a kind of like a crisis of some kind. You know, this is typically what happens at full moons anyway, and this is just kind of extra if you like. So there can be a bit of a potential for drama and overreaction, so just kind of be sensitive, be kind to yourself, because triggering is certainly possible, and it could also be the people around you get a little bit sort of extra sensitive or over emotional. So this particular eclipse happens in the 6th degree of Sagittarius, and the Sabian symbol for this is a game of cricket. Now this for me is absolutely fascinating. I never cease to be amazed at how the themes from each of these these forecasts end up really kind of being reflected back. So one of the main themes obviously around a game of cricket is fairness. You know, the English have a saying, something isn't cricket when they mean something isn't fair, because of course for the English, cricket is very much the game of gentlemen. It's supposed to be about good sportsmanship and gentlemanly behavior. So you could see themes coming up now around things like integrity, fair play, people playing by the rules or not, and also just possibly seeing through some of the kind of what's the word, the sort of viscera, or not the viscera, the facade of maybe certain traditions, rules, or just people. You know, I think that one of the main things that's definitely circulating around this particular moon is, or constellating rather, is about fairness, justice, and integrity. What kind of feels integrally fair? And I think, you know, as we'll see when we get onto the fixed stars and so on, I think one of the key takeaways from this lunar eclipse is that if anything over the last 6 months has been coming into awareness that you on some level feel it just doesn't sit right with you. You know, whether it's sort of a kind of an instinctual feeling that you can't quite put your finger on, or whether something comes to light now. You know, perhaps a truth is revealed, or something comes to light, and you finally get some answers that make you realize that something for you, it just doesn't gel with your principles. Then, you know, I think what this is saying is, you know, it may be time to sort of think about what you feel you can live with, you know, what is in accordance with your principles and what isn't, and where you feel that you want to kind of go along with the rules, and where you feel that perhaps you aren't really built to play that particular game. So here we've got the chart for this particular full moon lunar eclipse, and you can see the sun here in Gemini right next to the North Node, and then opposite is the moon in Sagittarius. So, you know, this is normal at a full moon for you to have the sun and the earth, the sun and the moon on opposite sides of the earth in an opposition. But what's kind of more interesting is that we've got Jupiter at the midpoint. You can see that it's forming a T-square to the sun and the moon with this great big red triangle that we've got here. So this essentially means that Jupiter is at a 90-degree angle to both of the luminaries at the same time. And so what this is really kind of calling on us to do is try to navigate our way through complexity. And I think it's this balancing act that it's needed between kind of heart and head, between left and right brain, between instinct on the one hand and intuition on the other, that's being called for now. You know, really, we might be called on to make some judgment calls now, or to sort of just make a decision that's really important. Perhaps we are kind of at some kind of fork or crossroads, and it may be that we need to assess things from multiple angles, see things from a number of points of view before we finally make a decision. So it may be that we need to kind of weigh up emotional considerations on one hand versus kind of logic on the other, and somehow make a decision that we can live with. Jupiter's newly ingressed into Pisces, which is a very cosmic sign. It's very much associated with spirituality, with the imagination, the creative imagination. It's also very strongly linked to what is kind of beyond us, so the kind of universal consciousness, but also like life after death, very sort of elevated philosophical concepts and issues, but sometimes it can be a little bit vague and nebulous, so don't be surprised if you do feel quite confused on some level. And I think the trick here is to really just try to remain open, to be okay with being in uncertainty, and also to listen and to ask questions, and to sometimes allow the answers to come to you, but once you've made a decision, to have the courage of your convictions to kind of act on that decision, but not necessarily feel rushed to do so. I think that's probably the best way to put it, because we are talking about a mutable square here. So mutable squares do tend to be a little bit less about action and more about being adaptable to circumstances and to kind of go with the flow. So with the moon being in Sagittarius, there's always the possibility that we can get triggered or we can kind of overreact. So I think it's important to just pause and to consider the facts, which is highlighted here by the sun in Gemini. Gemini is a very logical sign, it's an air sign, so it's all about kind of the facts. But it can sometimes be a little bit glib or perhaps a bit shallow. So there's a need to kind of balance facts on the one hand with our beliefs on the other, how we feel, and maybe our instinctive reactions, and then try to find the middle ground as a way to sort of make a decision that kind of helps us to balance our heart and our head. So that's one major theme. And then the second one is this wonderful trine that we've got between the moon and Chiron. So Chiron here in Aries, and of course this is all about that kind of that masculine wound, it's kind of the core wound, perhaps around asserting ourselves, defending ourselves from people who are aggressive towards us. It could also be a core wound from childhood, so a kind of an inner child wound, something from puberty to do with like bullying, for instance, or just generally feeling somehow not good enough or like you don't fit in. It could be any number of those things, but there's a real opportunity with this trine here to heal that and to find new ways to perhaps deal with that wound, in a way that isn't necessarily going to lead to self-sabotage, or on kind of on one hand, or on the other hand perhaps push people away unnecessarily. So we can see here that this that Chiron is also making a sextile to Saturn, which is newly retrograde in Aquarius, and then on the other side it's making that sextile to the Sun. So almost like an arrow, and I think it's quite interesting that this lunar eclipse happens in Sagittarius, which is of course the centaur with his bow and arrow, the archer. So very interesting that we've almost got this arrow pointing to the core wound itself, Chiron, and asking us to really kind of zoom in on it, kind of focus in on it, and find ways to turn pain into power. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So those are kind of the major themes, and don't be surprised if you do get triggered at this lunar eclipse, and if you do, see it as being almost like an opportunity to kind of like a healing crisis, if you like. So sometimes things have to kind of get amplified in order for us to really take note and to do something about whatever it is that's being brought to our attention, but also sometimes we need to allow the emotions associated with that wound to pass through us, so they don't kind of get stuck in our emotional body or in our energetic field. So I think the key message here is to remain open to nuance, to be okay with being uncertain, to allow yourself to perhaps also be pushed out of your comfort zone, because the the luminaries are aligned with the nodal axis. So it could also be a time when we're kind of pushed out of our comfort zone, but in order to grow. So even though it might feel very uncomfortable, we might feel a little bit confused, possibly overwhelmed. I think once that initial cloud passes, we may see things from a different perspective and be able to kind of move forward in a way that's new, but that's also perhaps better for us, kind of in the long run. So in terms of fixed star aspects, there's a couple of things that are going on that are quite interesting. So the first thing is that the moon is, or it will be, in the Via Combusta. So this is the area of the sky between around about 15 degrees of Libra and Scorpio in the tropical zodiac. But we are talking, of course, about the sidereal zodiac because we're looking up at the sky, and that's the grid system that's used to kind of find the positions of the constellations. And of course, I think many of us, after last year's sort of fiasco around the 13th zodiac sign, we kind of know that there is a difference between the tropical and the sidereal zodiac. So here I'm talking about the sidereal zodiac. So this part of the sky is it's kind of associated with going into the underworld. So again, if we think about that Chiron, those Chiron aspects, it's possible that we may, as I say, be kind of immersed temporarily in our shadow side, but it's in order to kind of do a little bit of clearing. But the other big theme, of course, is associated with Libra and with Scorpio is justice, and I think that is going to be quite a big theme. If we think of the Sabian symbol, which is about, as I said, fairness, I think there's definitely going to be we definitely be kind of asked to consider what we consider to be just, to be fair, and in some instances we may, particularly if we are triggered around our core wound, there may be a desire to sort of seek retribution, to sort of take justice into our own hands, if you like. And I think always wise to sort of to pause before we do something that we might regret. But equally, if we feel that we've really thought something through quite kind of clearly, it may be time to take action, because this particular lunar eclipse is very much focused on our masculine energy, which is about taking action, taking the initiative, being assertive. So just something to bear in mind. And then going back to what we're talking about, this being in the side of Sagittarius, here we've got Sagittarius the centaur with his bow and arrow, and he happens to be aiming his bow and arrow at the galactic center, which is here. Now what's so fascinating is that last year I kind of talked a little bit when I did my forecast, I think for for November, when I talked about the upcoming Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I talked a little bit about Sagittarius and the Archer and the vision that I had, which you can kind of go back and listen to from the sort of the previous playlist, and I talked about how a lot of galaxies actually have a black hole in their center. And here, as it turns out, our galactic center is called Sagittarius A by astronomers, and it is in reality a supermassive black hole. So I find it quite fascinating that he is actually aiming his arrow at this target, which is in fact a supermassive black hole that forms the center, the kind of 0 point, the kind of axis that pulls holds our galaxy together. So I think there's something very interesting about that image. And of course, with this emphasis on Sagittarius, Scorpio and Libra, it also makes me think back to November, December of 2020, when we had the US elections, and then it took ages for a winner to be declared, and it reminds me too of the fact that Joe Biden has a lot of Scorpio and Sagittarius in his chart, and his deputy Kamala Harris happens to be a Sun Libra. So I do think that we might, given that we are returning to themes that were very prominent during December, or from December onwards really, when we started that, when we had that solar eclipse in Sagittarius. So it could be that we're kind of returning to those themes, and we're closing out certain things, or kind of finding resolution to things that began then. So it's possible that on a kind of mundane level, we may have themes return around that issue. So to do with Capitol Hill riots, with Joe Biden, with his presidency, you know, all of that kind of thing, Donald Trump, etc., etc. So just, you know, something to you know, to sort of bear in mind. But I think overall, though, the key takeaway point here is the theme of justice, number one, and number two, the centaur, who is a hunter of some kind. You know, he's got his bow and arrow. He is a kind of a warrior, and as we'll see, that is actually a big theme, you know, as far as the sun is concerned. So here we can see the fixed star aspects of the sun. The sun will be parallel to Capulus. Now Capulus is known as the sword of the warrior, and it's because it forms part of the constellation of Perseus, which you can see here on the right. And you can see Perseus has got his shield on one hand, and he's got the head of the Gorgon, the Medusa, in his other hand. And it's very interesting. So this Bernadette Brady associates this particular combination as being to do with the sword of truth and to do with that kind of direct, piercing, penetrating action which she associates with masculine energy. So as I was saying, there's this very strong emphasis on our inner warrior, on employing our inner warrior. You know, if you think of in terms of the archangel, if you think about, for example, the archangel Michael with his sword, it's very much that kind of energy of cutting through the veil, getting to the bare bones of things, and also defending the truth where necessary, or defending ourselves if we feel that others are spreading lies about us, or saying things that are untrue, or are thinking or things that are untrue about us. So there may be something around that, you know, given that we've got the axis of Gemini and Sagittarius is what's emphasized. But Capulus is yes, I mean, it's also continues this theme of romantic pursuit, which we had so strongly at the Taurus new moon, which is all about, I suppose, more the kind of masculine in pursuit of the feminine. So that was more about kind of fertility and about abundance. But now we've kind of got a more of a chivalrous slant on things. So we're talking more here about defending one's honor, defending the honor of someone else. If you think, for example, a situation is unfair, being willing to speak up, but also to kind of defend the more vulnerable parts of ourselves. You know, if you think about this as being your masculine energy, maybe coming to the rescue of your feminine energy, such as, you know, if you think about the brave knight and how he rescues the damsel in distress, or indeed, you know, if we think about how a knight often pledges himself in terms of loyalty to a particular, often a particular lady, and so I think it can also be about kind of defending something on principle, you know, that needs to be defended. So lots of things to think about here. But definitely I think it could be about standing in your truth, defending yourself against smear campaigns, and also just getting clear about what is propaganda, what is fake news or kind of FUD on one hand, and then what you truly believe on the other. So interesting stuff. On one hand, and then what you truly believe on the other. But really the question, I suppose, that's on most people's minds is, well, how does this particular eclipse affect me? So to help you with that, I have created a little cheat sheet where you can look up your rising sign and then have a look at the two polar signs so associated with that, to see where the sun and the moon will fall. So for example, we can see in the middle here we've got Gemini on one hand and we've got Sagittarius on the other. So this is the pole between where the sun will be in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius. So for Geminis, you know, this will be about kind of seventh house issues on one hand, so romantic partners and significant others, and then as far as the lunar energy is concerned, we're talking more about you know, self-expression, physical appearance, and so on. So just look for your rising sign here, and then have a look at both axes, because this will give you a fair idea of what you're trying to balance, you know, at this particular full moon lunar eclipse. So I'll leave you to pause the video to have a look at that, you know, in further, like in more depth, and we'll get on with the rest of the forecast. So now let's look next at the human design aspect of things, because, as you know, I'm very big into my I Ching, and human design is one of those systems that I have been interested in for quite some time now, about 10 years actually, since I had a reading back in 2011. And, I love the way that it combines astrology and the I Ching in one system. So this really, I think, gives us a sense of how this particular eclipse is likely to resonate within our body and within our energy field. So I'm going to have a look at that next, just as sort of some extra information you might be interested in. So the first thing to sort of consider is that the moon will be in what they call gate 34. So this is hexagram 34, line 5. So hexagram 34 traditionally in the I Ching is it's called great invigorating, and it's all about Wang Hai, who is known in Chinese mythology as the first herdsman. So he was considered to be a metal magician and a warrior who drove the herd. So he was a great leader, he was very strong, he embodied the sort of the warrior king, if you like, and he was considered to be the founding ancestor of the Shang dynasty, which was a very solar dynasty. So the Shang dynasty is famous for their turtle divinations. That's why I've got a cracked turtle here. It's one of the early turtle divinations, which is the sort of forerunner of the I Ching. So this is very much to do with yang masculine energy. So again, reaffirming this idea that we are dealing with divine masculine energy, that we are being asked to sort of move into our divine masculine energy. And in human design, it's called the gate of power. And here it's all about learning to assert power without either being afraid or hiding our power, or indeed being too aggressive or pushy. So it's finding that midpoint, that middle ground, which is what Chinese Taoism is so focused on. And of course we have this in the played out in the astrology through that T-square between with Jupiter in the middle. It's kind of at that midpoint between the sun and the moon, so in other words it will be almost in alignment with the earth. So fascinating stuff really, that it's being reiterated across the systems. So line 5 in particular is about accepting. So line 5 is usually the sort of the power, the lord of the hexagram. So it's a very important hexagram. It's where things kind of come to culmination and where you can finally influence a situation. So here it says, you've got nothing to prove in your easy use of power. So you've learned how to wield power. Coupled with the moon, it can be about being moody and how this can affect your consistent use of power and can result in you being hesitant or perhaps, acting out. So again, what I was saying about that T-square, that it really is about balancing the solar aspects of our nature, which is that masculine, slightly more conscious energy on the one hand, and then the lunar energy, which is more feminine and is more intuitive and instinctive. So finding the balance in how we make decisions, how also we respond to stimulus in the world, in the physical world, or on an energetic level, and then act in response. So it's not that knee-jerk reaction of being triggered. It's more kind of scanning the environment and then getting information from it, and then using that information in a way that's going to ensure our survival or the survival of our family, or simply have us move in a constructive direction. So here we can see how it works within the energetic body. So this is the body graph in human design, and hexagram 34 sits here in the sacral region. So this is considered to be the region of vital energy. So it's associated with the sacral chakra. This is life force energy, and this particular it's activating the channel 3420, which links the solar plexus to the throat, and the throat in human design is all about taking the initiative or taking action. So it's part of the integration circuitry, which is all about individual survival and personal empowerment. So as I say, again, this is confirming the idea that this is really about learning to sort of stand in your power, to stand in place in terms of your conviction, stay centered when say others judge you unfairly or decide that they want to go in a different direction and it doesn't really resonate with you. So having the courage to go against the herd if necessary, to do what you need to do in order to stay safe, and to keep on an even keel and on your path, basically. So, on the other hand, it can also be on a very primitive level about hypervigilance. And so on an energetic level, I think it's very important to just be aware of fight or flight responses that are possibly triggered by, either other people or events in the world or your environment. But equally, this can be about the need to stay busy and to just kind of do all the time. And, in this sense, the advice that's been given is to be careful not to waste your energy, whether this is on, people that are constantly creating drama, whether this is a job that is a bit of a dead-end job where you feel as though you give a lot but you don't get a lot in compensation, or whether it's simply getting involved in projects where you are not recognized or acknowledged, or the energy exchange is not equal, shall we say, it's not balanced. So that's it. I hope you've got some use out of this and that you found it enjoyable. If you would like full access to my solar eclipse forecast for the next 6 months, then do sign up to my newsletter, which you can do at astrologysphere.com/subscribe. You may also be interested in a forecast that I've done for the Astro Insights blog, which is all about the medium-term outlook for the markets for the second half of 2021. And here I look specifically at the eclipses in relation to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, and then I also look at the Gann cycles with relation to the stock market and sort of the equities. So if that's something that you're interested in, then do check out my Astro Insights blog and watch the video that I've posted up there.